All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Game Music Composition. My name is Chris Latham, and we are starting out here at the beginning of week one, and we have a bunch of new information to discuss here, where we will do a bit of overview of the class and discussion of what to expect from the class and what's upcoming. We'll talk about the kind of the flow of the class, both the lectures and the assignments. And then we'll spend most of the later part of our session today discussing your new week one assignments that are upcoming. So hopefully you've taken the opportunity to go on FSO and download everything that you need to. And we'll probably load that up here in just a moment and go through at least week one here and talk about what is in store. So, as a whole, the class is purposed to discuss the role of a of a music composer working on a game project. So you have experienced a number of classes as you're getting here towards the end of your degree program. Earlier on, it was a discussion of technique and music theory and production and composition. And later on in these later classes, you have started applying those skills towards different parts of the industry. So, of course, there is discussion of songwriting and music production for an album, working with an artist or being the artist, and creating and producing the song. There's also discussion in your advanced music for media class. There's music for media where you write music for the purpose of a jingle or commercial work. So it's music that serves another purpose strictly than just the recording, just the original song. And then advanced music for media. You're focused on music and composition for film and television and basically an image. So your music serves what's going on the screen or what's going on in commercial or television work. And of course, now in this class, we are focused on applying your music to the format or medium of video games. And we're really here to show you that your music is just as viable in a video game as it is in anywhere else. So the last couple of classes are hopefully exposing you to and widening your horizons of where your music can end up. So we will talk about what is the same in the production of music for games and what is unique and different for a soundtrack for a video game. The most of the actual creation and production of the music is very much the same in any other, as it is in any other format. So it's still music, it's still composition, it's still music theory, it's still the elements of production and recording and capturing performance and mixing and creating the best production or the best recording of the composition, creating the best soundtrack that is necessary for the game. And so the actual creation of the music is very similar, but what you do with that music and how you apply it to the game, how it plays back, how it works with the actual gameplay, those sorts of things are unique. And so we'll certainly be focusing and discussing a lot about what is unique about music for video games. And certainly it adds another layer of what your music is doing and the purpose that it serves. Of course, there's music for the sake of music. There is music that serves an image or a video or a film. And then there's also, in games, you have the music, the sounds, you have the video, you have the image, but you also have a third layer of this of interactivity. So the fact that the player has control over the experience, how it plays and how it unfolds, and the music that they hear and the sounds that they hear, whether they are aware of it or not, they have control over the progression of the game. And everybody who plays a game should probably have a different experience. It will either be slightly different or it will be quite and very different overall from player to player, depending on what type of game it is and what type of experience it is. Typically more modern games and kind of bigger games have more possibilities in them, and you feel like you're more in control of the entire story. So one aspect that we will certainly be discussing is this interactive nature of your music for a game. The fact that when you hand a controller to a player and they start playing the game, all bets are off. You don't really know what is going to happen. Well, you know what's possible. You know what could happen. I mean, it is a game. It's a world that the game team has built, that all the players play in, and it is a finite world. There's only so many options, but as games get bigger and bigger, they feel almost infinite in their possibilities, and you have to create music for all of these scenarios and all of these possibilities that might occur. So one of the challenges here that we will discuss is how do you create music for a game where you don't ultimately know what's going to happen. You know what should happen, how it could happen, because more than likely there is a logical progression through the game. There's often like levels or a story that you progress through, and there's often a beginning, a middle, and an end to the game. So there's a finite series of possibilities and typically a solid path for you to follow. And your music serves all of that, but you also have to account for all of the other strange things that might happen in the game. Both winning and successfully going through and completing the game and losing, and all of the those negative consequences in the game. Because you don't know how people are going to play through the game. Some people are going to play the game and blast through it as quickly as possible, guns a-blazing, just going through as fast as they can, and they're either really good or they're just running through as fast as they can. And they might even pass by large chunks of content and music that they will never experience because they're going through it so fast. There's also other folks that will play the game that are just going to go in circles and knock into walls over and over and over again and get lost in a period of time and be stuck in the same place for 10 or 20 or more minutes while your music goes around and around and around and annoying the heck out of the player. So that is the interactivity of the game, where you don't know what the player is going to do at any moment overall. You can guess and you can take into account what's possible, but we'll talk about how you build music for a game where you don't ultimately know what's going to happen, or at least in what order it's going to happen. You know what could happen, but you often don't know when anything could happen. Another aspect that we will discuss is the fact, the idea of the non-linear nature of a game. We'll compare linear media versus a non-linear media like a game. Linear media is like most music that you've ever heard, most movies that you ever watch. You press play on the particular song and you listen to verses and choruses and solos and intros and outros, and it plays through the song exactly the same way. Every time you listen to that song, every time you watch that movie, it's going to happen the exact same way. And we use this, obviously, in our music with the structure that we put into our music of verses and choruses, and we are able to count bars and beats, and people can sing along with our music, and everybody has a shared similar experience of that song or of that movie. But with a game, you don't know what's going to happen, and everybody has a slightly different experience. Plus, let's go back with a movie. There, let's say you have a 2 hour long movie. There is one audio file that plays from the beginning of that movie all the way to the end, and it's the stereo mix or it's the 5.1 mix. And everybody who watches it listens to that exact same thing. That stereo mix represents all of the music, the sound effects, the dialogue, and every single time you watch that movie, it's going to be exactly the same. But with a game, games do not have a single audio file that plays from the beginning of the game all the way to the end. Number one, there's the interactive nature of the game. You don't know in what order anybody's going to complete anything. So your music has to be able to shift and change in reaction to whatever the player does. Plus, gaming experiences can easily last an hour or two, or 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 hours. People get lost in games for a very long time, especially a lot of multiplayer games, online games, again, more bigger, advanced games, what are often known as like an open world game where you can just kind of wander around and you're the hero of your own story. It really kind of feels like you can go off and do anything that you want in any sort of direction. And so if there's a game out there that somebody is playing for 100 hours, that does not mean that there is 100 hours worth of music sitting on the game disc somewhere. Certainly it's not a 100-hour single long audio file that plays from the beginning all the way to the end. Music for games exist in lots of little chunks, little pieces and parts, some parts that play once, some parts that loop over and over again, and those chunks of music can be put together and arranged and rearranged in any sort of order to make sense for what's about to happen in the game. So when I don't have any clue when you are going to get to the dangerous dragon cave in my game, but I know once you get there, there's going to be dangerous cave music. Then you enter the cave, and I don't know at what point you're actually going to make your way and find the evil dragon at the big boss battle in that part. You're going to find that dragon eventually and battle them. I don't know when you're going to do that or how long it's going to take for you to battle and defeat that dragon. But I know once you get there, there's going to be evil dragon music, there's going to be battle music, and you're either going to win that battle or lose that battle. So there's certain ideas of music and character and theme and all of those that basically sit there waiting for the correct action to happen in the game, the correct character or the correct objective or story plot point to hit, and then there's the correct piece of music that plays right along with it. So anyway, that gets a little farther overall, but a couple of things to pull out of there is music doesn't exist in just one big long file from the beginning to the end. It's made up of a whole bunch of series of individual chunks of music that are typically in the same key, in the same tempo, so they all kind of should fit together in different ways, and we'll talk about that and how they should be composed. So music exists in little parts, and that it's interactive. It's nonlinear and interactive, where we don't know what's going to happen. It can happen in any sort of order, and the player has control over all of that. So our focus is a composer working with a game team. What sort of skills are required? What's sort of expected from the game composer? And what's expected from the game team? And basics of that interaction and the process of creating a soundtrack for a game. So that's where we are headed, and we will get into our assignments here in a little bit because certainly we have games to work on. Again, my name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director of the class. I've been with Full Sail for about 15 years now. Started in the recording arts program before there was a music production program, working on consoles and in the studios. That's more of my history. Before Full Sail was post-production work, studio work, commercials, radio and television commercial, music, sound effects, dialogue, production. And I've always had a huge passion in games. About 10 years or so ago, games have really opened up. Let's say this better. In the past 10 years or so, the games have really opened up a whole lot more to allow folks to get in there and tear them all apart and get access, and in our case, change out music and sound. And so I had experience and knowledge in audio production, and I always had a huge passion for games. Wanted to tie all that stuff together, so I started working on some smaller independent, what are known as mods, which are often free. A couple of the first projects that we're working on was free while I was doing other production gigs, getting credits. I never really felt comfortable charging a client to do something that I hadn't done yet, so I wanted to get the experience. Started working on some small independent game projects, put way more audio effort into them than they probably deserved, but created like trailers and tried to get as much out of it that I could, and took those trailers and video game captures that I've took and brought them to EA Sports here in Orlando, and got a connection with them. I've worked on a couple of different titles with EA Sports, and then once you get some good credits under your belt, it just kind of expands from there. So, and then Full Sail got on the game audio train about, I don't know, it's probably about 7 years ago now. We created a game audio class on campus, and then the music production, this game music composition class needed to be built, so I came over and started this up. So, whatever aspect of the industry you are interested in and want to discuss, if you are interested in music production, music composition, obviously that's mostly what we're here for and what we will discuss, but also gear and hardware and software and tech and composition and just the whole production process, working with clients, all that sort of stuff. Anything you want to chat about, please reach out and discuss any of that stuff with me. I am, like I said, I'm the course director, but Michael Scicciano is going to be managing the class, and so you can send emails to him. His information is on FSO, or actually you can reach out to either of us, and if it's more towards assignments and grading, that'll be more his world for now. So but either or, you can reach out to me. Let's see. iChat and email are probably going to be the best ways. I am teaching on campus on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, actually, no. Fridays I am in the office, so I should be able to be reached all day Friday. But Monday and Wednesday, I am teaching lecture on campus, so I am away from my desk phone. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm teaching online, so I'm often away from my desk phone. So if you call there and leave a voicemail, please also follow up with an email. I can always reply a lot easier or quicker with an email. So let me know about that. What else? We have summer break here in the middle. Speaking of days, we've got this week on where we have class on Tuesday and Thursday, and these live classes, and your assignments are due at the end of this week, but the following week is your summer break, so you will have a nice reprieve. Everybody deserves a good break here every once in a while, certainly because of the pace of these classes. So it may feel like a normal week for you there with obviously like real life and work and family and all that stuff, but at least your Full Sail life will take a pause there. No assignments will be due at the end of that week. I definitely wanted to make sure to have all of the assignments due before the break and nothing due during the break, so that you wouldn't have to be working on anything over that time. So that is the intention there. That's my contact information. Beyond Full Sail, I also have a game audio contracting company. We worked on a couple different game projects. Here's a list of some of the projects that I've been involved with over the years. Mostly involved with Shark and Diver underwater game, multiplayer game that called Depth. and a PC game, some iOS games, of course, working with EA Sports on a couple of their different titles overall. So that's where I am at and how you can contact me. Two quick disclaimers here before we get started into the material. The first one is you don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. I know that folks coming into this class have a wide variety of experience with games. There are those that come through the class that are up on all the newest and latest games and are playing games and knowledgeable about the different game companies and different game projects out there, and are interested in the industry and are playing a whole bunch of stuff. And I can certainly nerd out with you all day long about the industry and about what's going on and chat about all of that. But I also understand that there's a large portion of folks coming through the class that maybe haven't played video games since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man or playing their Nintendo or Super Nintendo or something like that. And that's perfectly fine also. You do not have to be, there's no expectation of any skills at playing the game. You don't have to get the highest score or the fastest time. Your grades in this class are not based on your performance playing the game. However, during your time in this month, you will be completely immersed in the game industry. We'll be talking about games. We'll be playing games. We provide you games to play. I'll have some very serious homework over that summer break of a very important topic that I refer to as game research. Game research means you should be playing video games. So if anybody asks you why you're playing more video games this month, you tell them, well, I'm doing game research. I'm researching a particular part of the entertainment and music industry to see how well. And there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, it's number one, it's you're playing games, but number two, you're actually paying attention to the music and the sound effects and what's going on and why does the music play at certain times and how does it make you feel and how does it reacting to the action that's going on screen. So while you are here, we provide you games and we'll be certainly discussing all aspects of the industry. But you certainly don't have to be very good at playing video games to be successful, because the skills that are required for this class are the ones that you've been working on and studying and building all the way up through all of your classes coming to this point. The skills that are required are your skills in production and composition, music theory, being able to take a project and a client's intentions and render it into a working music soundtrack. So those are the types of things that are expected through the class. My second disclaimer here is a very common question that I get pretty early on in the class. Do I have to be able to program or code to be able to work in the games industry, to be able to be a music composer for games? And the answer is no, you do not need to be able to code or program. That is a completely different set of skills that that is somebody else's job responsibility. A lot of times the music composition, your contract is fulfilled with the submission of approved assets. So you keep delivering music over and over and over again until they have everything that they want and it's approved, and your job ends with the delivery of the WAV files. And then it's somebody else's job or gig to actually take that music and get into the game. Now we'll talk about some of the technology that's involved in getting the music in the game, and it's not all code, but in the early dawn of games and game audio, the only way to get music into a game was through code. Like all of the music of the original Super Mario Brothers was entirely generated in real time by synthesizers, or not really even synthesizers, by oscillators, running directly from code. There's no WAV files or sound files or anything like that. And so, but it was also determined quite early on that your best programmers are not going to write your best music, and your best music composers are certainly not going to write your best code. So you'd have to find a programmer that could kind of sort of make music, or probably even worse, a musician composer that could maybe kind of write bad code. So that didn't work too long as games got more and more advanced. So very often it is the music composer's job to deliver the completed and approved WAV files, and it's somebody else's job to get that music in the game. Now, of course, any sort of skills that you have are going to be beneficial. A understanding of the technology is integral. But we'll see as we talk about all the technology and the software, there are tools that remove us directly from the code. So we can live in our world of audio and waveforms and DAWs and have audio software that kind of bridges the gap and all of that. So, yep, just a heads up about that. You don't need to be able to program and code. I mean, obviously, if you can, you're going to be even more valuable. But for anybody that has ever tried to build a web page or has tried to learn some programming or code, Java or Python or C++, you'll know that it's just as difficult to learn as music theory and as challenging to that overall. And those are typically whole lifelong paths of knowledge that people go down. All right, let me take a quick pause here. Hold on just a sec. Let me know if you have any questions as we go. So, one thing that I haven't touched on yet is the flow of the month. And actually, well, whatever. We'll talk about it now. So this is Tuesday, our first meeting of week 1. So we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you cannot make the live sessions, then I am recording and archiving everything, and I'll post up the archive by the next day. So you can always get access to that. It'll show up as an announcement on FSO. And our Tuesday classes. Now, this Tuesday is a bit different overall because it's the intro material, intro discussion, talking about all the assignments. But by next Tuesday, we're actually going to be on break. So we'll take a pause there. But the following Tuesday, let's just say Tuesday of week 2. You will have completed your first round of assignments, and so each of our following Tuesday sessions are going to be peer review for the week before. So you'll see on FSO there's an assignment where you can submit your compositions for review in the live class, and I highly encourage everybody to submit. It gives us a great means to discuss everything. I'll load it all up. Let's see, do I even have Logic open right now? Yeah. I'll load it up something like this and load a whole bunch of WAV files in there and bring up everybody's projects and just talk our way through it. It's going to be your best way of getting good feedback overall. I mean, you get good, it's not the quality of the feedback, but the quantity of it, because I can go through the entire submission and talk my way through it and discuss all sorts of different aspects of it. So I definitely encourage everybody to submit for peer review. That will be the first half of all of our Tuesday classes. The second half will be a discussion of the new week's assignments. So we'll do review of the previous week's assignments and discuss the new stuff on Tuesday. Thursday is Thursday is an open session where showing up for the live class, we will have the opportunity to load up anything if you want to talk about it there. If you want to obviously come prepared with questions to ask and things to discuss, because I do have a archive prepared, and that will be posted up on FSO eventually. After, but that will be in live open session where we can you can come and discuss, and we can discuss any topics or listen to anything that we need to. So That and then the actual archive for the Thursday sessions are more industry topics. The first half of the month is more of the creative side of things. How do you determine what music is needed for the game? How much music is needed? Where does it all go? The overall theme and aesthetic and style and approach. Then the second half of the month is going to be more of the technical stuff. Okay, we have a whole bunch of music. We have a whole bunch of WAV files. How do we throw that at the game to make it work, to make it play back correctly? So that is generally the flow of the month. All of your assignments are due on Sunday. We have no class during our summer break next week. We have the live classes on Tuesday, Thursday, and the archives will be released by Wednesday and Friday. Yeah, that sounds about like all the stuff that I wanted to discuss. So, goals of the class. What are we doing here? What's the overall purpose? What's our intentions or goals? First and foremost is to write music. That's kind of the goal of the whole degree program, is to have you writing music, but specifically for a new format. There's an element of writing music for the sake of emotional quality or character development or information about the storyline. But there's also the aspect of the music that has to fit and play back in the game. We'll be talking a whole bunch about looping music, because a music loop allows us to sit in one place musically and go round and around and around while the player solves a puzzle or defeats an enemy or finds the next pathway or doorway to go on to the next point. So we'll be talking about the creative aspects of the music, but also technically how does it all fit and work together in the game. And you will be applying that to actual game projects. I haven't yet referred to your main projects, assignments over the course of this month relate to two game soundtracks and projects that you'll be working on. Your first week, you will be creating the music for our first game called 2D Platformer. Hopefully you've taken the time to go on FSO and download the material. Week 1, you'll compose the music for it. Week 2, you'll do all of the sound design for that game. So by the end of week 2, you will have the music in there, the sound effects in there. You'll test it all out. Maybe go back and do any revisions or changes, maybe mixed changes or tweaks. Then get it into the game, test it out, make sure it's all working properly. And then by the end of week 2, you will also do a video capture. You'll use QuickTime to capture the game video and audio on screen and turn in about a 60-second long video of the gameplay. So by the end of the month, you will have 2 complete, fully working Mac games with your music and sound effects. All of the audio will be your audio. And so you will have, really the focus of all these last classes is to be building a portfolio, getting as much material together as possible. The second goal of the class is to play video games, right? This is, like I said, an important concept of game research. It's still a tough thing for me to do, is actually sit down to play video games, because honestly, the most fun game that I work on the most fun game that I play is the games that I work on. I like the production and the creation of a game is way more fun than often playing games. But I know a lot of folks out in the industry that have a stack of games ready to go when they get through with their crunch period and their game is being released and they have like this little downtime. They'll go off and play a whole bunch of video games to be able to understand the competition, understand what's popular in the industry, and be able to have a common language with their clients, because clients speak in terms of previous projects. If you are interested in the music industry, you want to be a songwriter, you want to be a producer, you want to be the artist, you want to be an engineer working with artists. If you want to work in the music industry, then you need to be listening to tons of music. Lots of music in lots of different styles, and all the good music and all the bad music. Listen to good music and popular music and understand why good and popular aren't always necessarily the same thing. Lots of different genres, paying attention to the style, the approach, and the producer, the artist, the songwriter, the record label, and the studio that they produced it at. Pay attention to every aspect of it, because music clients speak in terms of previous albums. They'll say, "Hey, did you hear that kick drum sound, or did you hear that particular vocal style, or that songwriting approach when they went from verse to chorus, or any of those aspects?" And you will have that common language and understanding of what they are discussing. Same thing goes with film. If you're really interested in the film industry, you want to be a music composer for film, you should be watching tons of film, paying attention to the credits, the composers, the producers, the production companies, the directors, every aspect. You can get your hands on all sorts of behind-the-scenes information. And if you're interested in working in the games industry, you should be playing tons of video games. You should be paying attention to games, paying attention to the composer, the game developer, the game publisher, the technology that they used to make it all happen. Because, again, game clients speak in terms of previous games. They'll speak in terms of previous game soundtracks. And, hey, did you play this game and experience this thing? We're trying to go in that direction for our sound or music. And you'll have some sort of point of reference. It's a little bit more difficult in film and games than it is with music directly, when having a common shared language with your client. Because in a music studio, you would think between producers and engineers and songwriters and artists, they all have a common language of music. They all probably play music in some sort of way and understand elements of music theory and production. Certainly different people have different larger sets of skills overall. But there's some common language there. But working with a film director or a game producer, who knows if they've ever played a note on an instrument before or even understand any sort of ideas or terminology. So some of that stuff can be difficult. What that means is if you have some sort of reference where you both played a game and you can point certain things out in it, it makes your life quite a bit easier at times. And our last goal here is to certainly learn something. With all the music making and the video game playing, there is certainly a lot of knowledge involved in all this, a lot of technical understanding of what's happening and going on in the background, new approaches, new compositional approaches to the music. And there's certainly the layer of fun and entertainment with video games, but beneath there's a lot of technical understanding that's going on in the background. And, I mean, creative understanding also, the compositional approach and the overall theme and direction of the game. All right, let's take a quick moment here to jump over to FSO. Let me do that real quick. Oh, what happened? Oh, my windows are going all sorts of crazy. Hold on here. What happened to that? Let's try that again. New. There we go. So let me go on FSO. Again, please let me know if you have any questions. Now we'll be getting into the assignments and how they work and their overall approach. Well, we'll get there eventually. That looks good. All right, yours will look something like this. In the introduction, there are a few policies, contact information for you to check out. Oh, looks like the welcome game is not available. Hold on, I can fix that. Oop, hold on. There we go. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Welcome to game music composition, welcome letter, instructor contact info, and a couple of policy information there. Here's where we want to start with week 1. What I'm about to get into is the 2D platformer game composition. That's going to be your main composition for your first game. Please make sure you download the game and it's one zip file. You download that. It contains a movie of the game. It contains the game itself and a PDF that is the assignment and description. Your 2D platformer session preparation. This is it's a series of videos that basically summarize a lot of what I will be saying and maybe goes into more information in depth and detail of the process of working on 2D platformer. Your week 1 looping game music assignment is looping music is going to be very, very important for our compositions because, as I said earlier, it allows you to stay in one place musically while the player figures something out and allows the music to go around and around and around before you move on. Looping music means when the music reaches the end, it can return back to the front seamlessly and almost like invisibly, where it doesn't cause attention as it returns back. There's no pops or clicks or gaps, or it doesn't fade in and out. It's just one continuous piece of music. And that we'll discuss a couple of different techniques to get it set up. Here is the feedback and peer review. Again, once you complete your game composition, you can submit it for feedback. That way we can take a look at it in a live session. And like I said before, I'll just load up all your tracks into Logic, and we'll listen to it that way. Tuesday and Thursday virtual class gives you access to the PDF and the link to the live class. And some suggested reading and viewing, just interesting articles and links and videos and whatnot that kind of correspond to some of the things that we discuss per each week. I won't go through all of the weeks, but in week 2, you'll be doing the sound design for 2D platformer, and you will be doing that game capture. Once you have everything working in the game, both music and sound effects, you'll use QuickTime to do a video capture of 2D platformer, and everything will be you'll have your full game with everything completed in it. Notice that game capture is unweighted, and the reason for that is because you actually deliver it here in the composition description. This says test, and it is a test format, but you have all the answers because all the questions are about your composition. It's really like a summary post-mortem of your composition, your approach, how did it work, did it all work in the game, how does it all sound when it plays back together. So like we have a question, you will post up a YouTube link to your video capture, a screenshot of your session, question of what key and what chord progression did you use, so the melodic and harmonic progression of your game, the rhythmic progression of your game, tempo and time signature, a listing of all of your instrumentation, both the instruments themselves, like the patches, but also what synth sample libraries did you get the instruments from. That way, between your session screenshot and your list of instruments, I can get a sense of what you were using and how it was used. And I can also better identify what I hear. Intro cues. Actually, let's do this. Intro cues, main loop cues, and ending cues. These are going to be screenshots of all the files that you will deliver. And another screenshot of putting them all together to play it back. And then a screenshot of your mix. So I just wanted to quickly show you this composition description in week 2. Requires everything, obviously, to be completed and finished. And then the only thing really to point out in week 3 and week 4 is that we do it all again, but for a different game. So a different game is going to require a different style of music, a different style of approach to the music, all that stuff. Question here in the chat: is there a video that explains the steps? First, this archive will do that because I'm going to go into a pretty deep explanation of that first composition. And then the better answer to that is this 2D platformer session preparation is, yeah, it's a series of videos that go through all sorts of different aspects of it. You can download all the videos. So, yes. Lots. I basically want to say it live. I want to have it written. I want to have it in a video format. So whatever works best for you to go through. Okay, so week 3 we'll have a new game, a new composition. We also do a chiptune composition, which is we'll be talking a bit about history and the technology. So we will create a composition in the style of the original Nintendo and the limitations. All right, no problem. And week 4, if I can get down there. Week 4, you do the sound design and the final game capture. So basically do the same thing for both projects. All right, so please download all of the assignments on FSO as soon as you can. Get access to all the assignments. We'll help you out. There is a book that you should have received for the class. Please let me know if you have not. Composer's Guide to Game Music, and a great resource and extra information for the class. There are no questions or no material that is pulled, graded, anything that's pulled directly from the text. There's not like a test that you're the only way you're going to get the answer is to read that chapter. But it supplements the course and the material that we discuss very well. Excellent. Just started reading it this morning. Yeah, and for our purposes and the purposes of this class, it's great because these texts didn't really exist until more recently. Number one, it's a lot of times when you pick up a game, well, a lot of times when you pick up an audiobook, there might be one chapter about games. Then you might find a game audiobook and there's like one chapter about music. But this is a completely about game music or music for games. So it's a great resource in that. And it also doesn't start with, like most audiobooks, when you open up, the first 3 chapters are this is a microphone, and this is a waveform, and this is a 1 and a 0, and this is how we record audio, and all that. We get all past all of that stuff and get straight into the music and applying it for games. So great author, great text, all that stuff. Definitely a great lot more, like it goes into certain ideas and topics in a lot more detail than we can get into in just the class. So, all right, now let's get into our game specifically. The 2D platformer. When you download this game, or when you download this assignment, you get a zip file that contains a PDF, the game itself, and a video. And the video is there just as a reference. Don't like actually, well, you can bring it into a logic session. You can use it as like a reference to watch it, but don't post any sounds or music directly to it, because every time anybody plays the game, it's going to be different. I've had folks go through there and use the video very specifically, and it's there as reference, so you don't have to go play the game every single time. And let's bring the video up here. And set this up to loop. And turn this down and play it. All right, here we go. Here is 2D Platformer. It is made by Unity Games. All of our games this month are made in the Unity game engine. Actually, let's see. I think I might be able to turn this up a little bit. Oh, nope. I don't have my audio set up that way. Hold on. Come on. Let me see. This. Start this over here. It's running wonderfully slow. Let's see here. There it goes. I can play there in the background. Okay, so 2D Platformer. It is named that because it is a 2D platform game. It's 2D in that you can only go left and right and jump up and down. It is a platform game because the main purpose is to run and jump between different platforms and to shoot the enemies. As you can see, it's a pretty ridiculous concept overall. You are a bean with a monocle and a top hat there and a bazooka, and for some reason you're the only thing that can defend. This is London. You can tell that because the Big Ben is busted up over here. The aliens have invaded London. There's the London Eye. It's all broken. The alien ship has landed. This is London Bridge. It has fallen down, and the alien ship is there. All these cute red and green aliens have come to attack, and you are the only hope for bean humanity. You are a bean with a bazooka, and you're going to defend the Earth from this invasion, or something like that. It's not a complete game. This is like a slice of a much larger game, or it would be intended for that. Eventually, there is no end to the game. There's really no like start or end or anything. It's just this little area to play in, and the score just keeps going up and up and up. So let me back up and do this part. The game was made, it says powered by Unity. The game was made in the Unity game engine, made by Unity Games. They are the folks that make the Unity game engine. They're based out of San Francisco, and the Unity game engine is quite popular to make video games as a tool or resource to make video games. If you play a lot of mobile games, you may recognize or have heard the name Unity or Unity Games. It's also another, the Unity game engine is a game engine that people use to make games. Another popular game engine out there is the Unreal game engine. And that's a extremely popular game engine that makes a whole lot of different games out there. And so if you play a lot of games, you might see these different logos that pop up along with the different game companies. And it's kind of like saying I recorded my album in Pro Tools or Logic. I made my game in Unity, the Unity game engine, or I made it in the Unreal game engine. It's the main tool that you use to make your game. So this game company released a free demo called 2D Platformer that allows people to go in there and tear it apart and see how they can make it work and make their own game. And so we purposed it and put a system to play back music in a very specific way. The version when you get it will only have the sound effects in it, and it's your job to create the music for it. And eventually you'll go back and replace all the sound effects also. So let's talk about the music, and let's talk about the overall approach and what's how it's all going to be set up. Like I said before, it's a pretty ridiculous game concept. It's the game's probably meant to be silly and lighthearted and kind of wacky. It's probably like it's all ages or family friendly. You could see this as a mobile game. Somebody could play this on their phone or on a tablet or something like that. And so it probably doesn't take itself too seriously, and the music shouldn't also. And so for the style, I leave the overall style and theme, musical approach up to you. The genre, the style that you want, the instrumentation you want to use, just so you can wrap your head around how it's all going to work and how it's all going to play back. The actual style of the music, you can use whatever feels most comfortable to you or most appropriate, probably. So if you want to go... now, a couple of things. It's supposed to be lighthearted, kind of silly kind of game overall. Nothing musically, nothing too serious or dark or depressing or intimidating or anything like that. So keep it light and upbeat. Probably in a major key could work, although it doesn't have to be in a major key by any means. Up-tempo, kind of light and bouncy, a little bit faster to keep the energy going. That kind of stuff. So those are the kind of guides overall. Another thing to pay attention to is, well, actually, I'll reference that here in a little bit, is the fact that it's an alien invasion and it takes place in London. So the overall style can be in whatever direction, but let's talk about how the music will actually be formatted and played back. And to do that, I'm going to switch over here to the PDF and just kind of go through some of the information here. There we go. All right, so project overview here. A lot of this is the same kind of stuff that I'm already discussing. Kind of summarizes some of the points that I've already hit on, what the type of the game it is, and how it's going to work. Game overview talks about the game itself, where it comes from, and what type of game it is. Says here, 2D platformer games have a long pedigree in the games industry. Classics like Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong and Metroid were 2D platformer games, to modern varieties like Limbo, Braid, and Jetpack Joyride. So like I said, 2D because you can only go left and right, and platformer because you're basically jumping from platform to platform. Musical style, this is the part that I wanted to point out. I have this line here. Monty Python meets Mars Attacks, or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers. The idea that there's a little bit of, you can go in a sci-fi direction, probably like a campy 50s sci-fi direction, because it is an alien attack or invasion. There's also the British or influence since you're in London. So you can, whatever that means, whatever, if you want to go, I don't know, retro mod London, or you want to go into a more modern kind of feel, whatever that means to you. So those are ideas and directions that you might head overall. How to play. Hopefully the controls are pretty straightforward for you. Left and right, we'll move the character left and right. If you're familiar with keyboard controls, W, A, S, and D, you can use that, or arrows, left and right arrows to move them around. Spacebar will jump. Left click on your mouse will fire the bazooka, the main weapon. Right click will drop the bombs. There are bombs in the game that show up somewhere. There are these little parachutes that come down. You can pick up the bombs, you can shoot them, and they'll explode. Okay. So, the instrumentation. You certainly need drums, bass, harmony, and melody in each cue. And each through the entire composition. There needs to be drums for the rhythm and the energy of the music, and a strong lead melody that changes and develops and creates the kind of melodic voice of the composition, and then your bass line and your harmony to both support the drums and the melody. So at least those, you should probably have more than just 4 instruments per for your composition. You should have certainly a strong lead instrument, strong kick, snare, hi-hat pattern for your percussion, and then a couple of layers for harmony and at a bass line somewhere. Should give you enough instruments. You also need to make sure those instruments play through the entire composition, because our files are going to be divided out into, it's not just one long file, it's going to be divided out into different parts. And in this case, for this submission, you will be delivering a total of 9 files. And those 9 files are divided up into 3 different groups. You have 3 intro cues, 3 main loops, and 3 endings. And with 3 variations of each category, that will give us the variation in the music as it changes and develops and plays back. So it's not the exact same thing every single time. When the game starts, we have 3 intros, and it's going to randomly choose one of each of these. So it'll randomly choose an intro. All of our intros are 2 bars long. All of our main loops are 3 bars long, or 3 bars, are 8 bars long, and our endings are 2 bars. So this is a very common approach to games. Not 2 bars and 8 bars, but intros, main loops, and endings. Sometimes known as start, idle, stop, or start, loop, stop, or in, loop, out. Basically, you start with a sound that only plays once. You loop as long as you need to in one file or in multiple files, and then something happens and the whole thing ends, and you have an ending piece of music that resolves the composition. Everything's going to be 16-bit 44.1 stereo. The looping main loop files are set to loop. The intro cues do not loop. The ending cues do not loop. They just play one time. So let me explain what's going to happen here. Let's go back to the top of the game and hit play. So right here, your character drops in and the game starts. So when the game starts, the computer looks at, the computer asks the game, it says, okay, the game has started, what do I do? And the game looks at the code and says, okay, there should be 3 intro wave files. You'll see eventually you're going to take all these WAV files and put them in a very specific folder in the game, and the game knows that in this particular folder there should be these 9 WAV files that are named exactly like this. It has no clue about the actual music or the contents of those files. It just knows that those 9 files will be there, and they'll be named this way and formatted this way. So that means everybody can write their own music, and as long as they format it correctly, it's going to work in their version of the game. So game starts, and it says, okay, in this folder, there will be these 9 files. There will be 3 intro files, intro 1, intro 2, and intro 3. Randomly choose one of those and play it. And it's going to play. And the game has no idea about your music when the 2 bars is up, how the tempo, the time signature. It doesn't understand anything about the content of the file. All it knows is when that file starts and when it reaches the end. And when it reaches the end of those 2 bars, the game says, okay, now I've reached the end, what do I do now? And it says, okay, there should be 3 main loop files in that same folder. Randomly just choose one of them and play it, and it's going to play for 8 bars. So these main loops create the entirety of our, or most of our soundtrack during the gameplay. So it's going to play one of the 2-bar intros, end that intro, and immediately switch over to a randomly chosen main loop. So let's say it goes through intro 2, and then it randomly chooses main loop 1. And then once it reaches the end of the 8 bars, It says, okay, is this game still going on? All right, then I'm going to play another 8 bars. Then it will randomly choose another main loop. So next time, let's say it chooses main loop 3. Plays through that for 8 bars. Then randomly chooses another one. Can go back. It can go to main loop 2. Then it randomly chooses another one. Could go back to main loop 2 and play it again. It could randomly play the same main loop 2 5 times in a row. Statistics say that it probably is not going to do that, but it could do that. And for the entirety of the gameplay, it just randomly chooses these main loops. It'll start with, maybe it'll choose main loop 2, and then main loop 3, and then main loop 1, and then back to 3, and then 2 3 times, and then goes back to 1, and then back to 2. It just can jump in any sort of order. And so, as I said, the game has no concept of your music. But the only reason this works is because you composed it that way. You made sure that there's a couple of things here that need to be consistent through the whole composition, and that leads into a good question here in the chat. Jonathan, how different would the main loops be from each other? So let me talk about what's the same and then what's different. So you have 9 files. Those 9 files need to feel like one full composition. So it is separated out into 9 WAV files, but it really is going to be heard as one composition. So everything needs to be in the same key. Everything needs to be at the same tempo and time signature so that they will consistently and smoothly flow from one to the next. So for the instrumentation, they should be exactly the same. Well, there's probably ways that you could, cool ideas that you can think up that wouldn't be the case. But by default, all 9 files are going to have the exact same instruments in them. Same tempo, same time signature, same key. So there's so much the same. Now, to answer your question, what will be different? How different should any of these main loops be? So the composition will change. It'll be same instrumentation, but the composition will change below that. So with each one of these cues, you are going to have a variation in the drum pattern. So main loop 1, main loop 2, and main loop 3 will have slight variations of kick snare patterns. Hi-hat patterns might change. Bass line might change from one to the next. Chord progression will slightly change. But most importantly and most strongly, the lead melody will change. That's where you're going to get your most of your difference from each one of those cues, while having the same instruments, same band playing. Main loop 1, 2, and 3 are 3 variations on the same idea. Hopefully that answers the question or gives you a direction. And I am going to play examples here in just a few minutes. It's not just going to be me talking through this whole thing. I do have a couple of examples to play here towards the end. So, short answer is instrumentation stays the same all the way through. Composition changes from one to the next. Doesn't need to be wildly different compositions. I mean, there's only so far you can go from within the same tempo, time signature, and key. Yeah, same band playing the same composition, but 3 variations. It's also very important to understand that intro 1 is not always going to go to main loop 1 and is not always going to go to ending 1. I somewhat commonly get intro 1, main loop 1, ending 1 makes sense, but attach that to intro 2, main loop 2, ending 2. Well, that makes sense, but intro 1 to main loop 2 to ending 3 makes no sense. So you have to make sure that from variation to variation in all of the different combinations will always make sense. And so I think that's a good place to actually play some examples here. I'm not going to play all of them. These are different student examples. Each track is a different submission from different previous months. Give some good things, some bad things to point out and pay attention to. So actually, let's do... So, right, these are all like, this is one student submission, this is another student submission. This first column, all these three that you see over here, those are all ending cues. These are all intro cues, and these are the three main loop cues. You can see these are eight bars long. These are each 2 bars long. The only reason they're out of order like that is because that's how they import alphabetically. So let's listen to the first one here. A couple of things to point out with the main loops. First and foremost, the loops need to loop. Notice there's no gaps or fades. When we listen to it, there's no pops or clicks. They should seamlessly transition from one to the next without the listener really being aware of it. You want it to be as invisible as possible as it transitions from one to the next. Plus, it has the ability, it plays through main loop 1. It has to be able to jump back to the top of main loop 1 if necessary. It has to be able to jump to the top of main loop 2 or the top of main loop 3. So you have to make sure. It's going to be probably, you will be best served to start each one of these cues on the tonic, like the first downbeat of each one of these cues. The first chord is the tonic, so you know wherever you wander off to, it'll always return and resolve back to the tonic at the beginning of each one. Doesn't have to be that way, but that often helps. Let's see if we can hear this here. So is that working for you? Can you hear the music there? You can still hear me talking. How's that working? Okay, so let's just go ahead and let these play. Here's the first one, goes into the second one. You notice that from 1 to 2 to 3, there's some solid changes from one to the next. Third variation, changes in the melody, slight changes in the rhythm. And when it loops back around, it always makes sense. Here in the chat, sounds like a Barney episode. Yep, it's I think it's that marimba at the top there, but yeah, it's again lighthearted and all ages, family friendly kind of idea. It doesn't have to be that syrupy or saccharine or anything like that, but here in the intros. The intros are meant to build anticipation, build energy rising up to that main loop. So they typically start at a lower waveform and build and kind of rise in the power. They are 2 bars. They're only going to play once, and they transition directly into the main loops. So here's intro 3, what it sounds like transitioning into main loop 1. Let's try that again. All right, so again, if you start on the tonic of the main loops, the first chord there, then maybe with the intro you hang on a 4 or a 5 chord or some sort of suspension there before you know it's going to resolve into that first main loop. So here are 3 intros that are intended to build up and head into the main loops. Watch out for things like this last cymbal crash here. It gets cut off when it plays back. You want to watch out for cymbal crashes or reverb tails or instrument decay that would get cut off by the end of the file. Here are 3 endings that, first and foremost, the endings need to end. They need to resolve to a finish have strong resolution to the music, provide a strong finalizing kind of period at the end of the sentence, and they need to end in silence before the end of the file. You don't want the audio to be cut off by the end of the file. So, and these cues suffer from that. They kind of get cut off at the end. There's a cymbal crash there that just gets chopped off. So this waveform is probably a better approach, where it actually reaches silence and stays there. So there's one example. Here's another approach. Oops. Turn that down. So these first two are more acoustic instruments. So we got the kind of rolling stride piano and the organ, drums, tuba. All right, and then 3 intros. So they all should kind of build up and build to kind of like a peak where they hang there just a little bit, ready to drop in on the downbeat. 3 endings. So, again, the intros need to, they typically are heading in an upward direction, maybe kind of subdividing the beat and getting at least feeling faster, more intense. The ending cues do the opposite of that. They resolve. Typically they resolve back to the tonic, hit one last note or chord, resolve out to silence. Although there are a couple things to point out with the ending cues. The music needs to end within 2 bars, but the audio file can go longer than 2 bars in case you need to capture extra cymbal crash or fade or decay to silence. So the audio file can actually be longer than those 2 bars to account for anything like that. The other side of that is the music doesn't have to go the full 2 bars. It just needs to end within those 2 bars. So here, these I think take the full 2 bars. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that one ends on like the 3 of the 2. 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. So that ends all the way through. But there are some that another way that I heard that works pretty well is to end on beat 1 of bar 2, where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, and you just 2, 2, and just hang and hold that 2 out. So a couple other things. So that's something to pay attention to with the endings. They can go longer. Music has to end within 2 bars. The file can go longer, and the music doesn't actually have to end at 2 bars, it's just within that 2 bars. Other things that I've heard that's cool in the ending cues, you can get away with more stuff in the ending cues. Like the whole composition has been in major, and all of a sudden the endings resolve to some minor key or some diminished feel or complete dissonance or something like that, because you've It's the end of the game. You just lost all your health. You just screwed up. You got to start over. So here's some things that will actually using a minor key or some dissonance to have to put a negative connotation on the ending. Or the band falls apart where it's like like either the pitch ramp effect or like just compositionally everything just kind of falls apart. Or effects. Maybe the ending hits a big huge reverb or delay and bounces out, or I've heard bit crushers and all sorts of stuff that might help. So some good examples. Let me find some other ones here. Let's try, is it this one? The one that's got a pretty good these are all good examples, but okay, yeah. Here's one that's more synthy overall, which can give you another direction. Like the first two that I show is much more acoustic instrumentation, but this one has kind of that, I don't know, 90s synth, video game kind of synth vibe to it. A strong groove to it, plus a good lead line that develops and changes. With some good changes from one cue to the next. All right, and then the intros and the endings work out well for that vibe too. And here are 3 endings. Here's where they hit that minor feel. Well, at least the first one they do. So everything's been major over here. And then, well, that's actually minor, but. So you can get that switch from major to minor and get a kind of a good tinge or color to the music as it changes. Yeah, that should be most of what I wanted to display and kind of discuss and show off. Suggestions for the composition. Oops, where'd it go? Compose interesting loops. This is probably one of the biggest issues that I hear is repetition in the composition. You have most of your music during gameplay is going to come from 3 8-bar loops. You do not want to make those loops even more repetitive by, a lot of times what I'll hear is a 4-bar loop repeated twice. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me. A 4-bar loop repeated twice in those 8 bars. So it's really not an 8-bar loop. It's the same thing going around twice. Or even worse, a 2-bar loop 4 times, or I've even heard a 1-bar loop just go around 8 times. And then there's not enough change from one to the next. So it becomes even more repetitive overall. So definitely use that lead melodic line to develop your melodic ideas. Transitions, make sure all the loops transition fluidly. No pops or gaps or clicks or no changes in tempo or time signature or key. All that stuff can really interfere with the fluidity of the music. Again, yeah, keep the same tempo all the way through. Continuous loops. I guess transitions is make sure everything matches melodically and harmonically. This is keep the same tempo. This is don't pop or click. An overall mix, constant levels. Ultimately, you have control over the final volume and the final mix because you're doing both music and sound effects. When you do your sound effects next week, I will suggest that you put your music in there too, and actually balance the two together to make sure it's going to sound correct. Your overall mix, you should have solid levels, fill up the meter. Obviously, don't go over 0, but I don't know, like a negative 20 to negative 12 RMS kind of value, average RMS value should be pretty good in the mix. And then you are going to put your music into the game and to be able to test everything out. So I just want to point this out quickly. What do I want to do? I want to go back to where I was. Week 1, 2D platformer. Okay, here we go. Right here, yep, and right here. Or not. How about here? There we go. Okay. So once you have created the music and you want to test it out in the game, this gives you information on how to do it. It's really kind of a simple process. You're going to right-click on the game and choose Show Package Contents. And then it's going to give you a folder called Contents. And you're going to go here, Contents, Data, Streaming Assets, Music. So you go to Contents and Data and Streaming Assets. And you're going to get these two folders called Music and Sound Effects. Your Music folder will be empty. Your Sound Effects folder will have all the sound effects from the game. Next week, you're going to replace all of these. You're going to take your 9 bounce files and put it into this folder, and the next time you run the game, it should magically work for you. If it's not working, then check the file formats, the sample rate, the bit depth, whether it's mono or stereo, and the name of the file. The file names have to be exact in order for the game to actually use them. Then you'll take a screenshot and you'll submit everything on FSO in a zip file. What else do I have here? That is pretty much it. The only other thing is to show you real quick, this is your second game of the month. Oh, well, that's probably really loud. Hold on. Hold on. How do I not make that so loud? Oh, goodness. It's getting out of control here. Hold on, let me do it this way. Let me get a video that I actually can turn down. Let's try that again. This is Angry Bots. And you can see it's a completely different style of game. This one's much more kind of dark and intense and action-packed overall. You are a mercenary infiltrating a robot factory. And the robots are certainly not glad that you are there, and they are going to come out and attack you. Or I guess they're defending their robot base. So each one of these robots is going to have their own musical cue, and we're going to talk about how we're going to switch the music back and forth during the battles and during the when they engage the enemy. And how do we have music that quickly changes between battle music and what is known as often ambient or exploration music. So that's coming up in week 3. What else? You also have a looping assignment. We'll probably start out on Thursday with a discussion of that assignment. But looping music is very, very important through the entire, for all of your compositions. You're going to be using it for all of your compositions. All right, that should be enough from me. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes after class. If you have any questions, go ahead and post it up in the chat. But other than that, we'll meet again on Thursday. We'll have an open session available for questions on the project. Please play the game. Start thinking of ideas for your composition. Get started in your composition. Maybe you run into some issues or problems, and we can discuss it in our Thursday class. We also have an archive that'll be sent out. This is being recorded, and I'll send that out by Wednesday, and that'll get us all started. And then we'll learn a whole bunch of stuff in week 1 and then have a whole bunch of time to forget it all the way through week 2, all through our summer break, which is not what you should be doing. You shouldn't do that. You should study very hard over your summer break and remember everything. But there we go. We have a nice break coming up anyway. So, yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Other than that, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you again on Thursday. Thanks.